Welcome to Transformation 2.0, the podcast for change leaders. My name is 𝗞𝗲𝘆 and in each episode we bring you real conversations with executives, innovators, and experts who are shaping the future of business. Whether you are leading a team, scaling a company, or navigating the challenges of transformation, this podcast will provide you with insights, strategies, and inspiration to drive meaningful change. Join us as we explore what it takes to lead, adapt, and thrive in an ever-evolving world. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Transformation 2.0. We're going to be talking to Mariah MacInnes, who's been working in the content marketing space for a while, and we're going to be having a good conversation about why content marketing is core to B2B marketing. And we're going to be talking about why it is important to take a customer-centric approach for content marketing. All right. So welcome, Mariah. Thank you for coming on the show today. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you for having me, Tamara. I always like to talk content. So yeah, my name is Mariah MacInnes. I am the founder of a content marketing agency called Content Queen Mariah, and our mission and drive and purpose is to really support business owners, really create that connection with their audience, as you mentioned, customer centric. I think content now, there's no mistaking that you just have to turn on your phone to see that social media is everywhere. People are always creating content, and it really doesn't matter what type of business you have. It is the future, and social media isn't going anywhere. And I really support my clients to not just create and post and promote their business, but to create that connection with their audience. So we're creating that impact and we're actually having value. So I have about 8 years experience in marketing. I've worked in internal comms, PR, journalism. So storytelling is a really big part of what I do and what I help my clients with. So I'm also a digital nomad and I travel full time with my partner. And I think life is content is what I always say. And I think getting out there and exploring the world has definitely given me a lot to talk about over the years.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you for that intro. And I'm curious, how did you end up in content marketing, Mariah? What was your story? How did it draw you into? Uh,
Good question. So I've always loved storytelling. That's why I went into journalism. I studied journalism and PR at university, Deakin. And I started journalism, and in my first year, I was like, oh, PR is interesting because I really liked the dynamic of that two-way communication, whereas journalism is just giving the story, whereas PR was having that conversation with your audience. So when I finished university, I naturally went into public relations. It was a lot easier to get into. And then journalism, very competitive and very hard work. So I started working in in-house. So if those that don't know, marketing can go in-house or NPR or agency. So in-house is for an organization. So I worked in the automotive space doing internal communications. And I, to this day, still think that the hardest marketing you'll do is marketing to employees. Rather than someone else that might be interested in your brand or might be interested in what you have to solve. Some employees are just there literally to show up and get their money and leave. So I had to make sure that the employees were engaged in what the company was doing, and I had to share with them why we were doing great things. And then naturally in that role, I reported to the head of marketing and PR and communications. And of course, what happens in big organizations, people leave or get made redundant, and slowly you start to weave into things. Now, I was the youngest in the team. I grew up with social media, so naturally my boss gave me the role of social media. But at the time, I was a writer. Had my own travel blog. I started my own podcast. I loved content. I loved sharing my story. So naturally, when I started my side hustle, which was on Fiverr, creating blogs and PR press releases for different businesses, I loved that content creation aspect. And then as I started to grow my side hustle, I just went naturally down that kind of marketing that is more of my creative storytelling side of things. But the thing I love about content marketing is there's so much you can learn in that because you're having that really direct conversation with your audience as opposed to maybe performance marketing or ads, you're sort of not really having that direct conversation with your audience or getting that feedback very quickly. Now, whilst content marketing's return on investment takes time, I think it's such a sustainable way to market your business and you can have that long-term impact. I think it's really powerful for businesses that have those like purpose-led missions and visions and values for their business to really jump on content marketing because it is the best way to connect with your audience. So that is how I got into it. And I think I'm the type of person, once I really love something, I like label myself that. So while I called my business Content Queen, I really try and embody that. And people that know me and talk with me know that is what I talk about 99.9% of the time.
That's very interesting. And I know you talked a little bit about, how it is the most difficult to talk to, convince employees to follow things and to market to internal teams. And I can kind of relate to this. I try to tell my son why it's important to eat his vegetables. So I kind of draw on that a little bit.
Yeah, parenting. You can learn a
Exactly.
lot from parenting about marketing because trying to convince someone that they don't want to be convinced of something, there's a lot of skills in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So you've been in the marketing space for over 5 years now. Tell us a bit about, how has the marketing industry changed in that last 5 years? Sorry, you said 8 years, right? So it's about 8 years.
5 years in my business. So I think
Okay.
5 years since
Yeah.
I really started, I guess, diving into it. When I worked in marketing, in such a big organization, you've got big budgets, you've got hundreds and thousands of followers. So marketing to in that space can be a lot easier when you've got money and they've been in business for 60 years, right? So can be easier. And I think my skill sets really took off in the last 5 years. And that was like just before COVID hit, right? So maybe, we're coming on 5, 6 years. Like that was when you could literally post anything and you would get engagement. You would get people buying your stuff. It was so much easier. Then COVID happened and it became even more easier because we were all at home, we were all scrolling social media, we were really engaged. Then what happened after COVID was the burnout. People sick of watching the same thing being sold to all at the same time. We had the government telling us stuff consistently. Our trust levels decreased massively in Australia, in the States, in Europe, like in most Western countries from the clients that I work with. It has changed so much. It has gotten harder. I'm not going to sit here and say social media is the, holy grail of your business. It's a silver bullet to marketing because it is changing. And then we had platforms like TikTok come into play where businesses couldn't rely on their polished logos and their brand. They had to go deeper, they had to go more vulnerable because people just didn't care. You see Louis Vuitton, all these massive brands on TikTok with very poor engagement. They have big followers because naturally they do, but they're not really, I wouldn't imagine they're getting much traction from TikTok to their business. A lot of theirs would come through, paid marketing. But these big brands that really relied on their image of polished and professional have now gone like, oh, and you know what they did? They hired a heap of Gen Zs to just start commenting and being community managers because they started to build that connection with their audience again. So you're talking about customer centric. That is what the brands that are doing it well now have realized that it's not just about pushing content out all the time and getting results like we could in 5 years ago. It's now about creating that relationship with your audience. And that's what they've done. They've hired people that get it. Younger generations that understand the power of social media, that have grown up with it, they've been born into it, and they really know how to connect. So, massive changes in the last 5 years. We could literally talk about it for hours, but I think the biggest one is just how content is now less polished, more connection based, more personal. It's not about not having faces in it anymore. Employee generated content has skyrocketed in 2025. We want to see the team behind your business, the people that when we call up, we talk to, the people when we're dealing with the sales team. That's who we're dealing with. This is the one thing I said to my boss before I left. We need to get that sales team out there. They need to be on LinkedIn more because they don't think of our business. They think about the logo. They don't go, oh, yeah, that company logo in their mind. They think of Scott from sales or Linda from reception. Like they're not thinking about the logo. So that's what I think has changed a lot is we need those faces, we need those people.
Yeah, it's the face of the people that you talk to on a day-to-day basis. They are the brand, right? They are the
Mm.
brand. The brand is the people now.
100%.
Mm.
And we're seeing it on TikTok, founders, CEOs creating their own personal brands. You have a personal brand, Chamara, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, you could have just been Anthosa. You could have just posted stuff on your LinkedIn business page. But now you've got to be that thought leader, that sharing the journey, sharing the vulnerability. Startups that are doing it really well are the ones that their founder is actively showing up and
Mm.
creating content and being there. And it's hard because we don't have all the hours to do that. So it's all about trying to maximize the time you have and the people in your team to support you. And that's something that I've started to think about, how are we training our team just to show up? Like if you're on a call, that becomes content. If people are asking questions, that stuff becomes content. So how can we get the whole team involved in this? Because it is going to elevate the business, 10x if you do it
Mm.
right.
I can relate to that, definitely. Cool. And then when I guess the question that always comes to my mind is, trying to sell to a consumer versus trying to sell to another business. There's a whole different kettle of fish, if I can use the term, right?
Mm.
So when we talk about B2B or B2C, and when in the context of content marketing, what comes to your mind? So like, how do we differentiate between selling to a consumer versus selling to another business? And how do you drive that customer centricity from a business perspective?
That's an awesome question because obviously B2C, we can think about that one person that we're selling to, or if we've got, more of a product rather than a service, it's, oh yeah, we know that person because they've bought our product. With B2B, there's multiple people making these decisions, HR, there could be, the CEO, the CIO, the CMO, like there's other people making that decision, right? But at the end of the day, what goes through my head when I think of this question is there is still someone at the other end. You just have to share with them how you're going to make their life easier and also the business. Because even though, yes, selling B2B, you're selling to another business, but you're selling to the people behind the business that need to get there. They've got a KPI. They've got a KPI they need to meet. So how is you helping them reach their KPI? So whilst you still have to think about the business as a whole, there is that person on the other end that is consuming. Recently, I'm working with a startup at the moment. They're in the HR space. They've created a HR platform, and I started doing some market research, but I'm talking with the HR leaders. But I'm trying to understand how they consume content, what answers they need, and how we can make their life easier, which will then, of course, help them with their KPIs, with the business as a whole, and obviously their stakeholder, which is employees. So you also need to think about what is that business, who's that business's stakeholder, and really understand it. I think with B2B, you just have to learn more. You've got to learn about the second and third connections that you're impacting with your product or service and really help your target audience help their target audience. So it's just a little bit, you've got to go a little bit more deeper, probably do a lot more market research. But whereas B2C, you've kind of just got that one person, unless you are marketing to children and you've obviously got to get the parents involved. But I think that one can be a little bit easier than having to think about, okay, in a business, who are all you've got the maybe it's HR director, CMO, CIO, and then they've got their, boss or the person that they have to answer to. So you've got to make it the easiest way. I see one of my clients doing it really well with her product. Her audience is marketing, but then it's also affecting her. She's realized after doing research, working with the client, that actually it's also the business leaders that have this pain point because it's siloed teams is one of the pain points that she's helping with. So she can now speak to the customer journey, the team CX, and she can talk to the marketing team about how they can then solve business issues, which obviously the person saying yes or no to the budget can see how it's going to impact
Mm,
business
mm,
results. So you just need to understand those like more deeper levels, but it can happen just through conversation.
mm,
I mean, I've had a couple calls with some people, these HR, and like those three conversations, which were 20 minutes each, so like an hour in total of my time, has probably saved me like a year of
Wow.
creating mistakes and trying to learn what content's going to resonate. And the assumptions that I made were wrong. And I was able to test that. Imagine me making those assumptions and testing them for like 3 months and them not working, rather than me having a 20-minute conversation with someone.
Definitely, I can understand that. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. Like talked about when it comes to B2B, it's more about thinking about who's the customer of the person that you're trying to sell to, right? So in a way, it's actually B2B marketing is still actually B2B2C. So you
Yeah.
actually, yeah. So it doesn't matter sort of how many layers you go. It's a B2B2C or B2B2B2C, because like at some level you know who exactly is actually the person that's being served by the organization, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting concept. So when it comes to, I guess, creating the content, I know you spoke a little bit about this already. So when you think about the challenges, obviously it's understanding that pain point is that you're trying to solve for them is important. But what are some of the other challenges that you come across in terms of the content? You know, what typically comes to your head?
I think there's obviously a lot of multi-layers. At the end of the day, I really think getting that message is really challenging and it might take time. And I think what happens a lot with marketing teams is we don't want to fail because we don't want to feel like we're not having that impact. But with messaging, you have to test things that are going to work, or with content. And then if something does work, you might go, oh, okay, that worked really well. For example, I don't know, you're creating something on TikTok and it just goes viral. Like my partner and I travel a lot. We do content. We created this one post. It was so unintentional. We were in a library in North Queensland, and we have a tent. We're living in the car. We're traveling the East Coast, and we're at the library working, having a great time. It was really sunny when we left the campsite, so we left all the tent windows open, get some air in the tent, and then it starts raining. And I mean like Queensland torrential rain. So I just started filming it. And I filmed the problem, which was me going, oh my God, we have electricity in that tent. We have the windows open, and me going like, we need to get home. And it's like a 20-minute drive. So I'm filming the process of us like panicking driving home. And then we pull into the caravan park and there's just this sun beaming down on our tent. Like, no joke, like clouds all around and then just this sun. And we're like, oh my God. Thank you, universe.
Somebody
Thank
must
you,
have been
God.
looking down
Whatever
on
there is
you.
out there, someone's looking after us. So we quickly go in and put all the windows down, and then it just starts like pouring rain. So we literally got there at the right time. I filmed that, right? There was problem, journey, solution. That was the framework. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time. I posted it to social media, and the next day it's got like 50,000 views, and we've gained like 200 followers. And I was like, what? What did I do? So I analyzed. I was like, yeah, it's problem, journey, solution. So I think the hardest thing with creating content is finding those frameworks that work and the messaging behind them, and then trying to make it repeatable. But sometimes it's not always repeatable, because then I go, okay, Mitch, I've got it. We know. So then we start doing all these certain videos and we think about it, but there's something in there that didn't quite work, because there might be another video that gets, I don't know, 500 views. And then so it's really about understanding those challenges that come with content marketing. Is there's no linear path
Formula.
and formula and silver bullet, but you've just got to understand, like, the more you know about your audience, and as we say, your audience, the easier it's going to be for you to test things. But I think you just got to be willing to kind of put your hand up and go, that didn't work. And that's okay, because we can try something new. And I think a lot of marketers, we often, and business owners in general, we put pressure on ourselves to get it right all the time, because we are just like, we should know our business, we should know our audience. We've been doing this for so long, but it doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes you can go, well, why did that work? I'm not really sure, but let's try some things and see if that's what it was. And I think the business owners that do it really well as well, and this is probably another challenge to answer your question, is they continue to build trust as opposed to always trying to sell. And I think, the people that do this the best, and often we don't always want to model them, but influencers. Because influencers create trust with their audience for years before they start selling something. And unfortunately, as business owners, we need to make money, or a business needs to make money. So we feel like, oh, well, we just need to promote our services all the time. And they forget that trust bit. And I think that is a challenge because you've got to find the balance between, okay, I've got a business to run. I need to sell something, but I also have to build relationships with my audience. And if I know the change that's happened over the last 5 years is that or that trust has decreased. So I have to spend a bit more time on the trust factor, but I also have to make money. So people need to know how they can buy from me. And I think that's a challenge. It's not easy. Sometimes if a business has worked out their marketing funnel, they don't need to sell so much on social media or through their content. It is a lot easier that way because then you can just use it as a channel for that top of funnel, brand awareness, building relationships, building trust, and just getting people onto a mailing list, a website, whatever that looks like. And that's even for B2B. You've got to build trust with the people that are the decision makers because they're the ones that, you need to get over the line. So
Exactly.
it's hard. It's not easy. It's hard.
I think you spoke earlier about when you talked about how marketing has changed in terms of what happened during COVID and sort of that, right? And that I think was like a really critical moment for content marketing, social media, and a lot of marketing in general, right? So obviously, like when this happened, yes, there was a lot more people coming online and consuming content, but at the same time, it also increased the number of people putting content out there, right? So
Yep.
how do you think that sort of changed the dynamics of content marketing? And then, how do you think, it's going to play out into the future? If you were to raise at a crystal ball and say, I think this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I like a crystal ball answer. So, yes, then it became saturated.
Hmm.
But I think it's interesting because now you can go, the people that are going to win at this are the ones that see it as an opportunity to add that value. And what does value look like? Like, create value. It's such a terrible piece of advice, but it's like value is going to look so different depending on what your audience is looking for. For example, when I had that conversation with that HR leader, I thought, okay, are they consuming LinkedIn like at nighttime? And they're like, yes. And sometimes on weekends. And I was like, really? That's fascinating. It's like, yeah, but HR is our job. So you need to understand, like, we're obviously interested in it and where we go for our information is there. And I was like, okay, would you like more like lighthearted stuff about it? And they're like, no, we just want solutions. Just give us solutions. And I was like, well, that's very interesting, right? Because I thought, maybe they're not consuming all the time on this platform. Maybe they need that space. And where I'm going with this is I think the people that are just creating for sales or to promote their business, to talk about themselves all the time, people just go like, well, that's not valuable for me. So I'm just going to tune out on what you're saying. But then I think there's also this other concept of exponential growth, which is time plus consistency equals growth, right? It's like, yeah, let's get on social media, let's do this, let's do that. And then they lose that consistency. The marketing team or maybe the CEO, depending on how big the business is and who's making the business decisions, right? Will go, ah, it didn't work. Move on. It's like the rabbit and the hare analogy, right? The person that continued on will be the person that gets the results. And it's exponential growth. But what happens is all these businesses that don't see the results straight away, they're gone. So what I think is going to happen with time from that 2020 kind of buzz of let's all get on social media is the ones that aren't willing to put in the hard work consistently will drop off. And the ones that are will continue. People get bored because they're not seeing that gratification, or they are at the start. Because when we start something new, you get that hype of engagement and then it starts to plateau, and people aren't willing to work through that plateau to build it up. So they'll start to fade. I've seen it with lots of business owners, startups especially. They go like 100 miles an hour on something, and then, of course, they just move through things very quickly. But the problem with content marketing is it's slow growth. So you got to be in it for the long haul. Otherwise, you're not really going to see those results. And it's even like, for example, I've been creating content consistently since 2019. And, there's people out there watching and you just don't know they're watching. I've had people that are like, oh yeah, I've listened to like every 268 of podcast episodes that you've put out there. And now I've decided that I want to work with you. So it's like there's people that consume very differently. So what I see is going to happen is we will continue to see that like new growth and then disappear, and new growth and disappear. And I don't think there's going to be like any new channel that's going to rock our world, because I think the channels are just evolving, and the businesses that are willing to spend the time building trust with their audience and really connecting with them are the ones that will see the results. And it's hard because, again, that instant gratification is what social media or content is all about: likes, comments, engagement. But often it doesn't happen overnight. And the second thing that I want to say to that is actually followers as a metric, I think will start to die. And the metric that will be more important will be views. How much has your content reached outside of your following? We're seeing it with TikTok, we're seeing it with Instagram, we're now seeing it with LinkedIn. LinkedIn video is now becoming like a TikTok news feed, basically. But what's happening is our content is reaching further than the amount of audience that we have. And it doesn't mean all those people are going to follow. But if I watch your video, Chama, and I'm not following you, and LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram knows that I've watched your video, they're going to give me more of your videos, even if I'm not following you, or more of your content, even if I'm not following you. So, and I think this is also going to happen with things like podcasting, and YouTube and all of that. You don't have to necessarily be following someone to consistently see their content. On TikTok, I watch a lot of TikTok. I barely follow anyone, but I keep getting their content, and it's great because I don't actually have to hit that follow button. So I think the metric that we're going to be looking at the most is going to be how far is my content reaching, rather than how many followers do I have.
That's a great point. So, I mean, obviously, like, we talked about, why content is becoming important for B2B marketing. And then we talked about sort of, why customer centricity is important for B2B marketing. And to me, like, what keeps coming to my head is, yes, we know content is important. Yes, we know you need to be customer centric with B2B marketing. But I'm also, I guess, a little bit mindful of how some of these algorithms on the platforms work, right? So obviously we know, like, the platform algorithms always look at what draws most eyeballs onto the platform, right? So how do we actually sort of like use that as a metric to try and make sure that the algorithms actually prioritize our content? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, because obviously we know social media's business model is for people to stay on the platform longer so they can deliver the ads. And that social media's business model is not our business model. It's not trying to help us in any way, because we have links to go to our websites and things like that, right, all the time. There's obviously people are starting to, put links in comments on things like LinkedIn. But now I think what is most important, rather than, okay, if I'm using social media, I want to get people to my website, obviously, how can I actually create conversation within the platform so that social media can see that I'm trying to keep people here, but then obviously move them through your funnel eventually. So it might take more time, but now we're seeing call to actions across social media is, DM me for the word, I don't know, marketing, to, get access to my insights on XYZ. So it's now about trying to, I guess, create more conversation, more engagement. And as I mentioned, that actually ties really well into building trust with your audience. Because if you're not trying to get them to a website, to sign up to your mailing list, to do something all the time, you just want to create conversation and communication with them. One, the social media algorithm is going to love it. And two, your audience is going to be like, oh, they actually care about me beyond my money or beyond my sale. And that's across B2C and B2B. Even like how many like messages do you think HR managers or CMOs, CIs get someone trying to sell something to them in their inbox on LinkedIn? Like loads, right? So if we're just here trying to support their journey and create conversation with them, obviously social media is going to love it and they're going to love it. But we also have to put our business hats on and think, okay, well, I need to maximize this opportunity eventually. What does that look like for me? There's lots of AI automations now that can support that process. LinkedIn, probably not as much as, I guess, your Instagrams and your TikToks, whereas like one thing a client and I did on TikTok is we just had a keyword like that, DM us the word home, and we can send a free resource to you. And that got a lot more traction than head to our website and download our free resource, because it just wouldn't have worked. And you can't really send links on TikTok. And it's just thinking about like customer centric or even a customer journey. It's just not a very nice one, right? And then people would often message us and we could have a conversation with them. And actually what happened there, this client who is in actually B2B, because they talk to business owners and they support business owners, and they found people were like, hey, can I book a call with you? And their offering is a 5-figure offering. It's not a couple $100 product. And they were getting people flying to Brisbane to have meetings with them. And it was very interesting off a TikTok video that it was about keeping people on the platform and having conversation in the messages rather than sending them to a website. So I think trying to think of other creative ways that you can spark conversation and communication, because social media wants you to stay on social media. But then going on that is having other content channels that aren't just social media. I mean, Tamara, we've just started this podcast, your mailing list, blogs, like trying to expand your content ecosystem so it's not just solely focusing on social media, because social media really only makes like 11% on average, 11% of website traffic. So it is quite low, really, considering how much time and energy we put into it. But if we go, oh, well, that's an interesting fact and stat, why don't I put more energy into actually just building trust and conversation on this platform, and then use other platforms like podcasting and mailing list, because we know people make purchases on our website. That's where we make all of our purchasing decision, is on a website. So how can we use other channels to kind of foster that? And that's a basic content funnel, right? Like your social media, a blog, a podcast, something like that, and then a mailing list website, sort of running people through that process.
No, definitely I can relate to that. I think that, you hit on something that I'm quite passionate about. You spoke about, what value do we get out of it, the content that we create, right? So if you were to think about, my thinking, it's not about return on investment, it's about value on investment, right? So if you were to talk about what's the value on investment for content marketing, like how best would you sort of think about it? This is probably the last question we have. We're almost out of time.
I love return on value. I think that really does resonate with content, because a lot of businesses, if you want to be in business for a long time, you want to create legacy, you want to create impact, you have to think about the value and the reputation that you're giving out by putting stuff on social media or
What's
through
the
your
value we
content.
get on that investment?
Yeah, so what is that value? Like, what are we trying to create? Legacy, impact, awareness around our brand. One of my clients, one of their biggest metrics this year is like, I want to go into a room and be like, oh, I've heard of your business. It's not, I've signed up to your business, I'm a member, whatever. It's like, so that's the value that she's gotten, right? So I think it's being really clear on the goals that you want to get from the content you're putting out there. And of course, we always go to return on investment, like to the income,
It's
the
what's
money.
been drilled into us, right? It's what's been drilled into us.
Exactly. And we're in business for so many different reasons. Of course, we need money to sustain ourselves, but like, if we think about legacy and our visions, and you're so passionate about your projects, right? And the value and the legacy that you want to leave, that, these platforms like social media, they're here to help you support that. Like, how can I get the most value out of this so that I can create my legacy
The impact
and
and the
my
legacy.
impact? Yeah. And what I find happens is the monetary or the sales is like a byproduct of you actually showing up to also create value or to get value from that platform. Because people go, oh, they're actually, now we have a radar of like, are they legit? Can I trust this person? And a lot now, people are buying people. It's just actually what's happening. People are buying people. That's why like big marketing agencies aren't really having the impact that they were, 5, 10 years ago, and people are going to more boutique or solo entrepreneurs. They get that really like one-on-one support rather than I've been handed off to who knows what, and I'm paying triple the amount of cost for
Yeah.
probably subpar content, really, let's be honest. Very, churn it out. And I know some agencies are great, no hate, but that's what happens. It's just how can we get this stuff out and quickly, as opposed to how can I get a really good service from someone? And I think, going back to creating that value or getting the return on value, it's like also, how can I take one piece of content that I've created and make sure as many people can see it to get that impact as well? So if I'm creating something that is meaningful and is here to help someone, then of course I want multiple people to see it. So that also is why having, I guess, that content ecosystem is really powerful, because you'll be able to get the most value out of the energy that you're putting into it, as opposed to just consistent social media 24-hour cycle where it burns out very quickly.
Rather than being on the hamster wheel, you create content and you reposition it in different channels in using different media, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I can relate to that. I think we did that with some
You're
of the
very good at
some of
it.
the events that we were doing, get the recording from the video event and then we reposition that.
Yeah, your brain is always going to that, Tamara. I think that's a strength to have as a business owner is, how can I get the most out of this? And like, for example, a podcast, it's evergreen content. It's out there for a long time. Yeah, things get dated and they're not as, maybe don't. Some of them are more like, oh, this is 2025 trends in strategy or in marketing or whatever. But still, someone's going to get value from that. And someone can watch that no matter where they are, what they're doing. They can continue to get that value. Like my highest podcasts are the ones from the beginning or the middle, or like it's not always the latest one that gets the most views straight away. And it's a long burn. Like I've got episodes like, oh, what happened there? It's like, oh, someone must have caught on to that and, have shared it or whatever, and more people are listening to it. So it's
and that's a good point that you made there. I think we kind of touched on a really important point. Right, with social media, it's all about sort of bringing more people into it so that they can actually have more eyeballs on content, right? But I think like with podcasts, it's about actually like finding people that are interested in your content and bringing them into your content irrespective of when it was posted. Because like with social media, quite often what you see is this sudden peak and then it drops, right? And then sort of like there's no long tail of value. Right. But with podcasts, I think like there is a sort of sustained value. You might not get the people that reaching out to you because of the content 1 year down the road or 2 year down the road on social media. But with podcasts, it can happen. As we said, people who've been listening to you for 267 episodes reach out to you all of a sudden.
Yeah, that happens. And also, like my own experience, my first ever business coach, I listened to her podcast for 1.5 years before I invested with her. And that investment was 5-figure investment. And I worked with her for a year. So like if you think about that, for her putting in, and she's not just reaching me, how many other people have that story with her, right? So like you think about how many people are listening, and we're going to get more value out of listening to a half an hour podcast or an hour podcast than a 2-minute video on social media, or even less, 6 seconds, some of them are. Like you want people listening to you for half an hour, not just a quick, oh yeah, cool, that was cool, give it a like, keep scrolling, because we've forgotten about it. But if you have the time to listen to a podcast, read a blog, watch a long form YouTube video, I could do long form content is like a hill I will die on. It's something I've always invested in. It's something I've always encouraged my clients to invest in. It's slow growth, but it is such an important, if you're going to be on social media, you should, and you have the resources, you should have a long form channel, because it's so much more sustainable, and obviously you can use it across so.
Cool. Thank you again for coming on this podcast, Mariah. I really appreciate your time and the wonderful wisdom you shared with us. It was lovely listening to your story, and I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Told you I could talk about this forever.
I believe you when you say that. All right. Thank you again.
That's it for today's episode of Transformation 2.0. I hope you found insights that will help you lead change with confidence. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformational stories to leaders like you. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, and if you have a topic or guest you would love to hear on the show, let us know. See you next time.